Sonic the Invisible Robotnik. It starts out in Hilltop Zone and wastes time explaining who Eggman is when that'll be demonstrated by the story anyway. He says blatantly unrealistic dialogue, which makes me thankful that this is probably going off the canon of Sega of America, where he's only this evil because a machine containing all of the world's evil exploded on him. So maybe it makes sense that he isn't ashamed of it. I hate that it doesn't actually look like Hilltop. What's the point of calling it that if it doesn't have the magically blue grass? It just looks like a generic grassy hill instead. But Green Hill and Emerald Hill get so overused that I was always grateful for seeing a normal looking grassy area for a change. It's just that if you're not going to make it look right, go all out and make it look even less like the game to give it a purposeful, unique identity. This is just different from laziness because the name of the zone doesn't tell you it's supposed to be blue, but does have you assume it's grassy. There's pointless narration that immediately downplays him as a threat unnecessarily when he's supposed to be intimidating. The writer should know that. That's why he has black and red eyes. It's like he thinks fans would be too scared unless he said, or so he thought. Eggman's got the brilliant plan to walk into a machine to make himself invisible. Not only is this something I'm pretty sure I've never seen Eggman do for himself before, but it also handles it in a creative way, because most people would just have him fire an invisibility ray gun at himself. It's easier to believe if he needs a big machine to do it. That maybe it'd require a lot of energy and resources. It doesn't need to have any words on the pages when he turns himself invisible. It's self-explanatory, and there's already pictures describing the same things. Eggman looks dorky by what he says here. Then he flies over Tails in the Eggmobile. It kind of defeats the purpose of Eggman being invisible if he doesn't make his Eggmobile that too. I don't know why he was so stupid. Sonic would go after it regardless. And it's not like it'd matter that he's invisible in a fight with Sonic if his first move isn't an instant killing move, which he wouldn't have the time to do. Sonic's just too fast and could go into a spin and cut him with his spines anyway. It'd be different if he was going after Sonic at night, or was wearing invisible battle armor. The people decide to be brave because Sonic would be, but somehow, seeing the Eggmobile fly itself makes them run away, even though they just planned on being brave. And a ghost would be less scary than Robotnik, because it wouldn't be planning to stuff them into badniks. They should assume it's being remote controlled, not freak out that there's a ghost. And if that's not it, why are they any more scared? It's either a ghost, or it's Eggman who turned himself invisible because he can invent anything. Or maybe there's just so many different people with special powers in this world that they just assume it's somebody with magical powers who's just abusing it to be invisible. And they're scared of what they could do. After more pointless words, I wonder why Sonic happens to be collecting rings in Hilltop Zone specifically. I have to assume that it's because he already got all the rings from the previous areas, and it hasn't been long since Sonic 2. It says Sonic's been racing at supersonic speed, when he's not supersonic and he doesn't have the boost yet. It's respectful to the source material in the sense that it's respectful of a part of it by exaggerating Sonic's competence. I don't know what it means by the rings supplied him with much needed energy, other than they magically turn into vitamins for him to ingest. At least that's creative and new. It's just lame compared to them make him invincible. But then again, that would destroy the tension. Eggman in fact was smart enough to leave the Eggmobile to take advantage of being invisible. He used it only to get to Sonic faster. Sonic runs over his toes in a surprisingly realistic outcome because he was still running while he was here. He should have waited until he stopped running to leave the Eggmobile. He's not this stupid. Eggman was badass enough to grit his teeth and avoid screaming until Sonic left. As for why his feet weren't destroyed from being run over at supersonic speed, he had rings that healed him. This is why I interpret the rings as taking a second before healing you instead of having you be invincible instantly. It functionally still does have you be invincible anyways, so it doesn't contradict the games. Surprisingly for me, it does show Eggman in pain after this. Too bad it says poor Robotnik, which goes against the point and feels condescending. It gives a feeling that's only there because the only people expected to read this were little kids. It wastes space redundantly saying that it's going to get back at him instead of explaining they used the Eggmobile to get on the loop. It's weird that I have to assume that because we saw everything that happened before now. And it's supposed to not injured anymore, so like I said, rings. Finally, they had Hilltop Zone look right. Or at least the loop does. So they did research on what the loops looked like there because they naturally assumed they look different depending on the level. But of course they didn't look up what the level itself looked like. I don't blame them because it's only natural to assume a hill would be green. It's like Japan's fault for not telling them otherwise. Google wasn't launched until 1998. And this picture book was released in 1994. It would be bad faith to assume that they played through the game, and so they saw what the hills looked like in that level, and still chose to only have the loop be accurate. It'd also be ridiculous because even kids have a hard time getting that far into Sonic 2 in the first time. It's more likely that Sega Japan showed them what the loop looked like in a picture, but didn't show them what the entire level looked like for some reason. And they didn't know any kids. Even if it's the best case scenario and Sonic wasn't moving when he got on the loop, he'd still run into him after he gets off it, obviously. And he's so high up without his Eggmobile that he'd have to have a painful fall to get down. So if he got some rings, it makes sense that he'd hate him enough to see that as worth the pain anyway. I guess that's also why he thinks it'll be worth it to let Sonic ram into him. It'll hurt Sonic too. This takes advantage of the fact that in the games he's sadistic enough to fight Sonic himself in every level. As he tried to snatch at Sonic while he was in the loop, he misaimed because Sonic was so fast and he fell. So his plan was even stupider than I thought. Considering how fast Sonic moves, he would have only gotten his arm sent off him. It's like trying to catch a train. Rings being able to heal him means his arms would immediately grow back, but still. The point is, it's impossible for someone to be this stupid. He knows science, he wouldn't attempt this. While it is a little satisfying to see him fall looking scared, it's not as good as actually seeing him land. The next 2 pages are a waste of time breaking the fourth wall and lying to me because I never get to see the impact when Eggman landed anyway. Instead, it's censored by inexplicable yellow clouds from him breaking apart Badniks that could only be generated if he had such gas in the Badniks. There's never been a story where Eggman did the Badnik bounce before. It explains that the reason Eggman didn't get up to avoid Johnny jumping on his head was that he was still stunned. I don't get to see the impact, so it's hardly satisfying. At least it's creative effort that Johnny Lightfoot's the wrong color. He's smart enough to decide to rest. There's more padding until he goes onto a tram to get to a lower part of Hilltop. It's nice to see that actually being used as a story element as Sonic goes on it with them. He should have said snuck though. I don't know why his spell check didn't underline it and instantly make him correct it. Relatably for the players, Sonic immediately got bored waiting, so he jumped out of it just as Eggman tried to grab him. All because he didn't go on a tram that was over lava. I like that he tapped his foot impatiently because he did that in the games. References only deserve cynicism and terrible stories that aren't faithful where it counts. Sonic would have heard Eggman talk unless he's so fast he's already out of earshot by the time Eggman started falling. He's just so confident he's playing dumb. Well, he does move at over 600 miles per hour. Eggman falls into a pool. It's creative that there's a pool in Hilltop. There's more than just lava pools. Lucky for Eggman, he has to know to swim because he immediately complains instead of sinking to his doom. At least Eggman gets to scare people away by the sight of splashing from nothing as he swims, having been smart enough to have taken swimming lessons ahead of time. Eggman had a pool in SA1, so he can't swim, but there was no hint that he could swim back then. If someone only likes this because it became accurate, it goes to show you how silly it is to get hung up on inaccuracies that don't matter since they can be temporary. At the time, this was a great inaccuracy for being respectful enough of him to assume he learned how to swim. After pointless words, Eggman at least tries to be entertaining for us by relishing and scaring them. After more patting words, he stands behind a spring as Sonic approaches it, wondering where Eggman's been all day. So he really was fast enough at supersonic speed to instantly get out of earshot last time, go figure. It's so easy to predict how this will go wrong. Eggman wouldn't be fast enough to grab him anyways. It's always been obvious to me that he'd need to make himself as fast as him to be a threat to him when Sonic's moving fast. I wonder if it'll be stupid instead of what I predicted. For no reason, Sonic arbitrarily decides to use the seesaw that takes forever and requires repeated attempts to make him go especially high. And it doesn't even look like he's heading for it. And it doesn't look like there's any reason that he would want to go high. Because there's no raised platform. No one would choose that over a spring. I already assumed that it'd find an unpredictable way for Eggman to get disappointed. If he had psychic powers, he would have clearly started taking advantage of them before. Eggman lampshades this, and after patting, he gets startled by just how high the red spring launches people, which is relatable. Eventually it says Sonic ran over him, somehow not tripping over him, or knocking Eggman ahead from the momentum. This would only not kill him from rings healing him. Some badniks try to attack Sonic, and Sonic uncharacteristically runs away without trying to free the animals trapped inside them like a hero would do. This is what a player would do instead. It states the obvious and gives me the mild catharsis of being told that Eggman got singed and very bruised. Eggman finally takes the hint, miraculously, since he never gives up on anything normally. I guess it makes sense because usually the stuff he never gives up on doesn't cause him pain. He states the obvious to himself for no reason. He makes himself visible, and for no reason, he also makes it overload and explode instead of making all of his robots invisible. When Sonic runs into robots in the games, he loses rings, so he won't even need to just do this for the badniks that can electrify themselves. What an impulsive, hot-headed moron. He's not that dumb. He's supposed to be a genius. After patting, Sonic knocks him off his feet and uncharacteristically apologizes, which he would never do even sarcastically. He's got an attitude with him even in the games, like SA1. Eggman cries because of Sonic like an AOSCH. He should never be written to do that. He's always trying to kill Sonic, and while he isn't a threat to him, he is a threat to the animals he puts in badniks. Sonic mocks him by saying bye in a bunch of ways quickly while leaving. It's subtle and keeps it short. That's nice. It's so oddly tame for someone with an attitude and every reason to hate him for kidnapping people. I guess the logic is, it'd be out of character if he didn't pretend to not hate people for the sake of looking like they can't ruin his optimism. And that's the final page. Why didn't the book tell me who wrote it? That should be illegal. The wiki doesn't tell me either because of this. This story, where Eggman tried to grab Sonic while invisible while he was moving, had a creative premise and always felt worth it to experience, so it did the bare minimum of giving me a new experience that didn't totally suck. But it was a little frustrating because it was impossibly stupid. A genius expert in science would know better than to try to grab Sonic while he's moving. He has to stop to eat. He could have waited. It would have been an easy idea for anyone to come up with to wait until he falls asleep first. Then Sonic wouldn't have been able to experience it, and I guess it makes sense that because he's sadistic, he wants him to experience all of it. Not take a while to wake up to it if he does. But he wouldn't have that problem if he just grabbed him when he was eating. The main problem with this story throughout was that the pacing was slow because there's too many pointless words in it. A lot of the dialogue was unnecessary obviousness stating. It was great that it was Eggman versus Sonic the whole time, but a part of me disagrees because of how humiliating this was for Eggman. But you're supposed to find it cathartic and funny, so it missed the point of the book to get offended at this. And what's good about how it handles it is that it's an immediate punishment to him for trying to mistreat one of the most important and heroic characters. Not Ergo. It's someone you'd already expect him to fail at hurting anyways. That's what makes it different from other pathetic moments for Eggman that we're all familiar with. So that has to be what justifies it. So I wish there were a lot more stories like this. This is so much more Sonic-like than Sonic having to deal with a god monster for the first time. We only think it's Sonic-like now because of how many times it's happened. Sonic was just like the games for the whole book. It's unique that he barely talks, and I appreciate that. And the story was creative and charming. It's sort of believable since Eggman's arrogant. So I think it was good.